Hello and welcome to DarkHorse FM, and in today's video I'm going to be sharing with you the Football Manager rules and combinations that you should try to avoid when playing Football Manager 2022 or indeed any other Football Manager game as well. These combinations are backed up by research that I found on Football Manager blog, and I'm also agreeing with some of this research because I've used these rules to some extent in Football Manager 2022, and I realized that applying one or two of these rules together or pairing two rules together, two of a certain particular role together, would cause you problems and cause you to limit your team's ability to create chances and create space in Football Manager 2022. The first role combination we're going to be looking at is the AP and DLP combination. That's the advanced playmaker and the deep line playmaker combination. Ideally, I'm going to argue with this a lot because I have used this pairing before, and I've also used the advanced playmaker or double advanced playmaker pairing, but then I realized that unless you're trying to create a really obsessive possession-based style of play that involves creating so many chances or having so many players play as the main man in the team, because the idea behind the advanced playmaker is this player is the prime creator for the side. So having an advanced playmaker or double advanced playmakers or an advanced playmaker and a deep line playmaker means that these two players to some extent are going to have problems, because both players will be attempting to create chances for the side, and then there's going to be a lack of directness, or let's say both players would not be involved defensively in trying to win the ball back from the opposition. So if you realize that you're using two playmakers in your team and your team is struggling to win back possession of the ball, all you have to do is swap one of your playmakers to a ball-winning midfielder or a box-to-box midfielder. Ideally, this pairing is going to be a lot more effective because you have one player that is going to be more aggressive, trying to win the ball back from the opposition, while allowing the deep line playmaker or the advanced playmaker, as the case may be, allowing the advanced playmaker to be a bit more creative. Now, it's not a rule that you have to use or that it is impossible to use two playmakers. The problem is if you realize that your team is weak in midfield and that you don't have anybody that is that solid player that can win you the ball back, it may be that you're using two playmakers in your team, and then being that you have two playmakers, it means that your team is quite soft in midfield and there isn't that aggressive ball winner in the midfield, so you might want to swap that role for a more aggressive role. The next combination that we're going to try to avoid in Football Manager 2022, although this is rare and it only occurs when you're using a back three, is the halfback and the libero pairing. Having a halfback in here, the way the halfback operates is that the halfback's role is to drop into the space between the central defenders. So if you have two central defenders, your halfback becomes your third central defender, in essence creating a sort of makeshift back three. If you're using a back three and then you have a libero playing in here either on support duty or on attack duty, it's quite contradicting to use a halfback in the defensive mid position as well. So if you have a halfback in here, he's going to try to get into this space in between the central defenders, and because the libero is also operating in this position, they would somehow get in each other's way more often than not. Now you would notice that the libero, on the other hand, you would see from the way the libero operates, the libero aims to drop deep behind the defensive line, aiming to sweep up the balls and pick up the extra attackers and make it go, saving tackles, blocks and interceptions. The way the halfback operates is quite very similar. He is going to get into the space between the between the two central defenders, and sometimes to some extent he might drop slightly deeper. So that way he's going to be operating in the same region that the libero is supposed to be operating in. The libero, unlike the ball playing defender, which is going to be a quick fix for when you want to use a back three and a halfback, if you have a ball playing defender in this position here, this player would tend to get ahead of the halfback, and that way the halfback can get into the space between the two central defenders, and then the ball playing defender would get into sometimes to some extent, depending on his player preferred moves as well, he would dribble and get into the midfield, into the DM position. That way essentially you have the halfback and the ball playing defender swapping roles. This role swap behavior would not occur if you're using a libero on support duty or even on attack duty, because the libero is somehow going to always operate in a slightly deeper position from the defensive line, not allowing the halfback to drop into that space. The next role combination we're going to look to avoid in Football Manager 2022 is having a winger on support and a wingback as well play in the same flank. The issue with this is because at first when I saw this in the research, I kind of argued because I've used this role combination before. But in that sense, using a winger and a wingback in the same flank, what will happen is the winger on support duty is going to get into this space here and try to cross the ball. What the wingback would do is essentially the same thing if he is on attack duty. So he's going to get into this area here and try to cross the ball. essentially both players are getting in each other's way. So what I did when I was using a winger on support duty and a wingback on attack duty, what I did was to change those roles. So if you have your winger on attack duty in this position here, he's not only going to get into the wide area to try to cross the ball, he's going to be slightly narrow and then try to get into the box and try and finish off chances, as much as he's also trying to get into wide areas. But if you have a wingback on attack duty, that's going to also be a problem. So you opt to have your wingback play on support duty. This is the only way I found that this combination works. Essentially, both players are going to want to get into each other's way. If you have two generic wingers, that's a winger and a wingback on support duty that are so generic, like in lower leagues, these players more often than not will get into each other's way. So the best thing to do when you don't want to use the winger on attack duty and the wingback on support is to have this guy play as an inverted winger on attack duty or on support duty. Once he's on support duty, he's going to get into the middle, get into the number 10 position, get into the box as well, and giving space for the wingback that is on attack, or indeed any other role duty selected for your wingback, to get into that space vacated by the inverted winger on support duty that is ahead of him. The next combination we're going to be looking at is the shadow striker and advanced forward combination, or poacher combination. Essentially, having a shadow striker and a more direct adventurous striker ahead of him might just be, let's say, overly attacking, and in the sense, if you find yourself struggling to create chances, struggling to create space in the opposition's defense, it's probably the fact that you're using an advanced forward, a leading striker that is on attack duty, and a shadow striker as well. Ideally, what I've noticed is that the shadow striker on attack duty is also a very leading role. He's also a role that spearheads the attack. So what's going to happen is that these two players will get into each other's way, and more often than not, they will be blocked by the opposition's defense because there isn't any space for them to operate in. What I like to do to combat this when I'm using the shadow striker, of course, is to allow the striker to play as a complete forward on support duty, or have him play as a deep line forward on attack duty or support duty. That way there is a lot of space, because this guy is going to move in and around this region here, allowing space for the shadow striker to get ahead of him and work on that space. The only time I've been able to get the advanced forward and the shadow striker on attack duty, both of them to play in the same game for it to work, it was in a cup game against Ipswich with my Leeds United team. And to be fair, my Leeds United team is quite a good team as well. So what I did was to have my advanced forward play on the left hand side on attack duty, and then have my shadow striker play on wide right on attack duty as well. That way, to some extent, both players do not get in each other's way. The shadow striker is going to be more involved in taking care of the right hand side of the space. As you can see, there's a space ahead of him here. And then the advanced forward is going to be more inclined to the left hand side. That way, both of them are attacking different regions of the pitch. The last role combination we're going to look to avoid in Football Manager 2022, or indeed any Football Manager game, is to use two inverted players on either flank of the pitch. Just like we saw with the winger and the wing back on support duty, having an inverted winger and having an inverted winger and an inverted wing back on the same flank is also going to have most of your players into the central areas of the pitch, and then leaving a wide gaping space in this wide area here, and the AI defensively, the opposition might just be able to defend against it. Or if you have an issue trying to spread the opposition and trying to create chances, because Football Manager, indeed modern football, is all about finding and creating space. So if you have two players playing on an inverted role like the inverted winger and inverted wing back, you might struggle to create space. So what I like to do in this sense is, if you have an inverted winger here, you need to have, to some extent, probably a complete wing back, a full back on an attack duty, a wing back on attack duty or support or automatic duty. Just have a player that is going to operate in the wide area and then take advantage of that space that is left behind by the inverted winger that is cutting inside. Alternatively, you can have your wide attacker play as a winger on support duty or even on attack duty, and while he is on attack, he's going to spread the play, and then you can have your inverted wing back here also probably playing on support or even attack duty as well, and his role is going to be to cut inside into the middle, taking advantage of the space that is created when the winger is on the wide areas trying to drag the opposition out wide. The inverted wing back can actually take advantage of the spaces in the center of the field when the winger has gone out wide. So guys, these are the roles that for now we know that may cause you problems when you're using them together in Football Manager 2022, and I've also shown you how you can tweak those roles to get better results in FM 2022 as well. So let me know which roles you've been using in Football Manager 2022 and how you combine them, and indeed if you're playing FM21 as well, Let me know the roles and combinations that you use. If you're having any trouble pairing or with the role or the current role pairings that you have, you can let me know in the comment sections. We can look over your tactic and see how we can tweak it to make it more effective and help you win more games. I'll catch you in the next video with more Football Manager hints and tips like this. Remember to subscribe to the channel if you aren't already subscribed, and I'll catch you in the next video.